Welcome to The Critical Path, Greater Vancouver Realtors' professionalism and innovation-focused podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Lalime. Each month, we sit down with industry leaders to discuss the critical issues affecting our profession and the paths we must take to overcome them. Now, as with many organizations like ours that have been around for over 100 years, you can spot some pivotal moments of change. Like, for example, when GVR opened its doors in 1919, things were a little bit different along gender lines. Female agents were unheard of. Today, nearly 60% of all the realtors in Canada are women. It hasn't always been easy, and there are serious challenges still today that we'll discuss in a bit with today's guest, Jacquie McCarnan. She's not just a successful realtor, she's also created the North Van Cares Foundation and CWIRE, the Canadian Women in Real Estate Foundation. Jacquie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I wanted to take a little bit of a different track just to kind of kick us off because, we start talking about, some of these challenges and things that we've dealt with for years. I wanted to start with something a little more positive, and you've got a unique perspective for this one. So what makes it special to be a successful woman in real estate today for you?
I guess if I look back on the how the industry has grown over the last several years, particularly between the 80s and now, you can see a real difference in the way that business is done and how women have become much more prolific in the industry. Certainly, women behave in real estate slightly different than men. I mean, that's certainly what CWIRE is all about. But I think in the 80s when, and I've met many women who started in the 80s and 90s, and the challenges were crazy for them. They had to prove themselves over and over again. They had to work twice as hard to get half the amount of recognition. And I think we're in a position now where women are respected in our industry, and certainly by the public and mostly by our colleagues. And I think that gives us a leg up for sure from where it was. But I still believe we have quite a long way to go.
So you were talking about kind of the 80s and 90s. Go back to when you got started, because you've been doing this for about 10, 15 years?
9 years.
9
yeah.
years. Okay. A little off there, but still close. Talk about some of the challenges you were facing when you were getting started, and where do you see those kind of evolve?
Some of the challenges that I had when I began in real estate was I didn't grow up in the market that I was doing real estate in. And my kids were not really in school in the market I was doing real estate in. And that really, I noticed that people who grew up in North and West Vancouver had really big networks that were all kind of connected, and their kids went to school in North and West Vancouver, and so they had all the parents of the kids, and that was really, by the time I got there, my children were in high school, and it's not like you stand around the high school yard or field hanging out with parents anymore. That's more an elementary thing. And so I found that I had to work very, very hard to start to build my network. And that, anybody would have that same issue, except that I do find that men, for example, a man in my office, he was able to cold call and door knock. Things that I am incredibly uncomfortable with. I certainly would never door knock, and I really don't like cold calling. So some of the opportunities for marketing were not really available to me. I think that, other women might disagree with me, but I wasn't comfortable with some of the opportunities that were available or not available. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to get into when we're talking about some of these barriers that exist today, because you did an event here recently at the board where you shared some of this information, and I think we want to kind of get into it and kind of understand it a little bit better, right? So you were talking about kind of sales tactics and coaching and training. Those things can be really different between men and women and kind of comfort levels with doing those kind of things, right? Absolutely.
I had this analogy that I like to use. I don't know if you've ever done Bikram's yoga. It's awful.
Not myself.
It's
I've heard.
So you're in a room that's 400,000 degrees, and you're twisting yourself into a pretzel. And if you can't get yourself into the position that you're supposed to be in, the instructor somehow manages to make it your fault. And I kind of felt the same way about the high pressure tactics of expensive coaching programs that are run, that are male dominated. You know, Brian Buffini and Tom Ferry and Richard Robbins, and while I do feel that there are incredible takeaways from those programs, I've always felt when I was having conversations with those coaching staff, recruiting staff, that it was completely my fault that I was not willing to spend between $1,000 and $1,500 a month to better my career. You know, this is early in my career. I'm balancing 4 million things. I'm trying to decide where to spend my money on a website or on marketing or on social media ads. And then these guys are saying, well, we can make it way easier for you if only you were to spend a big whack of money on this program. And I felt a lot of pressure about those things. Yeah.
Some of the other things, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but we were talking a little bit about safety issues, right?
Yeah.
Because that's something that, I mean, it sadly seems to kind of never really go away, right? And, we were talking a little bit about how that ties into some of the professionalism issues too, where people are sending buyers to open houses without any representation, and can lead to some scary situations, right?
For people listening outside of the greater Vancouver area who maybe do lock boxes on their homes, it's not really it might not be the same issue because the buyer's agent goes with the buyer. But here we show our listings in person. So occasionally the buyer's agent might send their client without them. And while it's a courtesy to inform the seller's agent, it's not a requirement. So as the seller's agent, you're standing there in front of a person you don't know. They haven't been vetted. You have no idea who they are. They could be, a great big threatening looking man for all I know. And that has happened to me. And as you're showing properties to people where you are not 100% sure about who they are, we as women, and I promise you every single woman in the industry has done this, we are clocking where we are, where they are, where the safety exits are, how we can get out, where our phone is, how we can call for safety if we need it. And I don't know very many men in our industry who have to do that. That's an added thing that we have to do in real estate. And it's terrifying. I have actually, if you don't mind, I have a very quick story.
Please.
I was doing an open house in January at the very top of St. Andrews, which is in North Vancouver. And the next door was the forest. So we were the last house at the top. And it was a 4-level home and it was vacant. We had a lot of people through that day. I was the only one doing the open house. At 10 to 4, a guy came in. Everybody else was gone. This guy came in by himself. He was about 6'2", 200 pounds, easily could have done whatever he wanted if he had been a bad guy. He wasn't, thank goodness. But I'll tell you, there was not 1 second that he was in the house with me that I wasn't paying attention to everything. And I wish we didn't have to do that. And one of the mandates at CWIRE is to change that. I want that changed. And I think most women in our industry do.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into what I wanted to get into next, because you were mentioning before how that's not necessarily that kind of like pre-scouting of an open house to kind of know your escape routes and things like that is not necessarily something most men would have to do. And that gets into a little bit of what you talk about with invisible labor, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's a very, I guess, specific example of it, right? Because the more common examples would be unpaid housework,
Sure.
that cooking, cleaning, laundry, those kind of things, right? But it does bleed into the profession when you're talking about having to do things like that too, right?
Yeah, Canadian Women in Real Estate, we talk a lot about invisible labor. The statistic is that women do 2.5 times the invisible labor that their male counterparts do, which means that when the guys are out on Friday afternoon going for a drink at the pub, I'm driving my kids to cheerleading practice, right? Women generally, and I'm saying generally, I want to make sure everybody realizes that. I know that there are some awesome guys out there who take on a huge amount of this labor. Jesse might be one. But we do a lot of the scheduling, the kids' scheduling, and making sure that they're where they need to be. And, when they're sick, mom is usually the first call from the school. But then also on the other side, we end up doing a lot of the elder care for our parents. We are the sandwich generation, so we end up, having to figure out what they need. And I know many, many people who are in one or the other or both at any given time.
It stretches you thin.
It
right?
really does. And so what we see a lot in our industry, and many industries, but particularly in real estate, which is a self-accountability for all intents and purposes business, women either burn out sooner or they leave things on the table that they cannot pick up because they have all this other stuff that they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So before you even get out of bed, you have already 10 things and 10 decisions you've made. By the end of the day, you have decision fatigue. You're trying to figure out where to put your resources, where to put your brain, and then don't even get me started on what happens when you start going through perimenopause and menopause, because then your brain just like leaves, right, completely, and then you got to write everything down.
Physiological differences are a huge part of it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the gender gap is kind of the last one I touched on in the intro. You know, that 60% number, right?
Mm.
But then you can follow up with the second half of that stat for us. That
Yeah,
maybe
so
indicates-
60% of Canada's realtors are women, but we found that only about 30% are in policy-making positions and on like sitting on boards or managing brokers or broker owners. And we don't want we don't need to have that number up to 60%, but it'd be great if it was 50, right? And so one of the major mandates of Canadian Women in Real Estate Foundation is to provide training to lift women up through the ranks of real estate and get them into those positions so that we can start making policies that help us work the way we need to work, right? Where we set boundaries and we inform the public, because the public, I mean, I still get phone calls at 10 o'clock at night. I don't want to answer the phone at 10 o'clock at night. And I know that men do too, but, you know, by 10, I'm pretty burnt out, right?
Yep. I think most people are, right?
Sure.
Some sacred time, right? And
Yeah.
everybody kind of needs to recharge. And so this leads us into, you know, obviously for each kind of specific issue, there's going to be kind of a specific kind of plan to kind of work towards, you know, mitigating them, eliminating them. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at CWIRE, because I was going through the website and I noticed, you know, the blog section is just chock full of resources for things like, you know, honing your skills in social media or, you know, learning how to do what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Tips for podcasting, you know, things that might help stand out. So maybe, I guess it's probably a big answer, right? But
It is a big answer, but I have a big answer.
Get right
for you.
into it. Get right into it and tell us.
When you look at traditional coaching websites online, you're going to see a lot of the same thing. A lot of the information on those sites is leading you to pay for coaching. And while we think that paying for coaching is a great idea, it shouldn't be the first place you go. So we are creating CWIRE to be, I like to use the analogy that we're kind of elementary school and high school. And once you get through those, then you can go to university and pay the big bucks to get that, you know, more individual coaching. We're going to provide some group coaching at the upper level of CWIRE, but more importantly, we're going to do things a little bit different. So real estate is, you know, mechanisms, tools, so systems, that sort of stuff. So you can learn that anywhere. When we are going to have a little bit of that. It's also marketing. You can learn that anywhere too, but we're going to have a lot about marketing and specific to how women, you know, work through marketing. But we're also going to have things about mindset and safety and learning how to work in a way that doesn't burn you out. And a lot of people would say work smarter, not harder, which is a catchphrase, but it's true it's said for a reason, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a really robust mentorship program, but it's not just going to be older agents mentoring younger agents. What we want to do is a reverse mentorship program as well, where younger agents coming in who are very familiar with the tech start to help and mentor the older agents and teach them how to do the tech. And I mean, it's a runaway train at the moment with AI. It's improving and growing so fast. And if we are not on top of it, we're going to be left behind so quickly. I think if you were to leave the real estate business for 2 years now and came back, you would be completely lost for the tech. And I mean, on your last podcast, Jeff King was talking a lot about that and how they're incorporating tech here at the board level. And I think we all need to be paying very close attention to that. It's easier for a young mind to soak that up. They grew up on their phones and their tablets. They know how to do all this stuff. The only reason I know how to do any of it is because I have now they're adults, but but they've been, on me.
It's been their world, right?
Yeah,
They've
I have to
grown up
post
in this
reels.
world. Yeah, right.
Which I don't love, but they make me do it. But the idea here is that we want CWIRE to be the first place that women go, regardless of where they are in their career, whether they're just starting out or they're, re-licensing or they're thinking about it or they've been in the business for a really long time and they just want to have some support. We want to provide that support at all levels. And then we want to take the content that we have that's curated and collected and created by women for women with the specific purpose of that shared experience so that we can build each other up. It's all about collaboration. It is not about competition. It is not about grinding. It is not about working until you can't see straight. We hear that all the time in our industry. Just work harder. Just do more. Well, there are only so many hours in the day. And if you keep working harder and keep doing more and keep putting off the balance that you need in your life for sanity, eventually you're just going to burn right out. And who wants to be rich and miserable, right? I'd rather be poor and happy.
Yeah, for sure.
Or maybe somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between might be more ideal.
Yeah,
right?
I think it would be better.
Yeah. No, I love that kind of two-way nature of it, right? Because experience and knowledge is a shared thing, right? And it goes both ways for sure. And I think I'm a little bit kind of behind where you are in the cycle, but with my daughters, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Where I learn almost as much from them on a daily basis, skibbity riz and what have you.
Have
right?
they ever come home singing a song from the 70s? You're like, where did you hear that song? It's on TikTok.
No, but they definitely hear songs that, originated back then from something new, and they think, oh, that's from this show I just watched. I'm like, actually, that song came out when Daddy was a little boy.
That was BTO.
Yeah, right.
Well, and that's the other thing, that networking component that, every woman in real estate has the shared experience of being in real estate. We have almost all experienced very similar things in our careers. Let's say I, for example, figured out a really great way to mitigate the safety concerns. I want to share that across the country with 90,000 realtors. I want everyone to know. And we're going to have, the mentorship program, the training. The training will lead to coaching. We're going to have a coaches page where you can come and choose your coach. And there'll be significant coaches from Canada, women. Sorry guys, but this is Canadian Women in Real Estate Foundation. People can choose their coach on the coaches page. We're also going to have something similar to Reddit, where a forum where women can come in and type in something that maybe is a challenge for them, and they'll get lots of feedback from other women.
Group feedback, yeah.
I think eventually my dream is to have a extended medical program that people can buy into. Right, when you get a great big group, you get great rates. All that sort of stuff that's kind of missing. Right.
One big part that we haven't mentioned yet, and I noticed it on the website. It's a big part of your story too, and at this point, by the time this comes out, the news will probably be a little bit more widely spread. Jackie is our Realtors Care Award winner for 2024, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
The charitable aspect, right? That's something that is very near and dear to your heart from the stories we've seen from your experience. And so, from somebody who has that as part of their core, maybe just, talk about the connection between charitable giving and being successful in business, right? And how does that become kind of a unique experience for women?
Yeah, philanthropy has been a huge part of my life. It always has been. It was ingrained into me as a child. Just a very quick story. When my mother was a child in Toronto, she was the eldest of 5, and she had a single mom. And if it weren't for the Toronto Star Santa Claus Fund, they wouldn't have had Christmas presents. And I did a little digging about that, and the fellow that owned the Star at the time, his name was Atkinson. When he was a young man, a young boy, a woman handed him a pair of ice skates so he could go skating. He was too poor to have ice skates. And he remembered that, and then he grew up and became very successful. And he played that forward in such a major way that my mom got Christmas presents. So then my mom played it forward to her family. And now that's why philanthropy is so important to me. That's why North Van Cares started. That's why the Canadian Women in Real Estate Foundation started. We are going to set up a board at CWIRE called the Giving Board, and it'll be separate from our CWIRE board. 10% of every penny that we make at CWIRE is going to go to the Giving Board to be distributed throughout Canada for women's programs. And they will decide, people can write in and ask, apply for grants, I guess. But I'm just going to be the person that sets it up.
Set it up and
then I'm going
let it go.
I'm going to appoint somebody really amazing to run it. But I think when it comes to how you run your business, I think that everybody should incorporate philanthropy from the very beginning. There are lots of ways to do that. Most brokerages have an opportunity for you to just peel off a part of your commissions and donate them. But if you really, really want to make a difference, you need to get out in your community and make a difference in your community.
You got to roll your sleeves up, right?
Got to roll your sleeves up. There are a million opportunities to do that too. Habitat for Humanity. I chose to do something a little bit different, but also it was different times. I woke up on the 17th of March in 2020 and went, oh no.
Yeah.
People aren't going to want to leave their homes. What can we do? So I put together this big group on Facebook, and we connected seniors and other people with I called them shopping buddies. And the shopping buddies would get a list and go grocery shopping for the senior and deliver everything to their door, sprayed down and with masks and gloves. And then people would call and ask for beer, and I'd be like, sure, no problem. I can get you some beer. And some of those people are still working together to this day, just, and they're great
bonds, right?
Great friendships were built from that. The North Van Cares did 2 giant galas at the shipyards in North Vancouver as soon as we were able to, right? So 2022 and 2023. And those were amazing because then we could see the faces of all these people that had been involved in the foundation from the beginning, and it was wonderful. And we raised a lot of money, and we gave it all away, which is a terrible business model for anybody listening.
Not when it's going to a good cause. So that's great. This has been great, Jackie. I wonder if there's one last kind of story, one last kind of little empowering anecdote or thing that you might want to leave our listeners with here before we sign off. Yeah,
I actually, fun fact, everybody, Jesse sent me the questions before. You can cut that after.
That's, this is how the sausage is made.
I've been thinking about this question because I wanted to really explain why this is so important to me. I'm 59. I grew up in a time when girls and women were pitted against each other. It was always competitive. We were always competitive with each other. When I got into real estate, I found that women were in 2 camps, competitive and collaborative. And I found that as a super competitive person, sometimes I'd lean toward competitive, and then I would think, oh, why is that person getting this? And then I really did some work. And I really examined where that was coming from. And I didn't like that part of myself. So I switched everything to collaborative. And now Canadian Women in Real Estate is all about inclusion, collaboration, support, networking, mentorship. I want all of us to feel supported. And I know that there are women who started in this industry. I've had many come up to me and tell me that they wish there'd been something like this when they started 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, people were after each other. But now, we really need, especially now, we really need to just lift each other up. There is enough pie to go around. We don't need to be fighting over it, right? And so that's why it's so really very important to me, to my board, to all the women that have been involved in Canadian Women in Real Estate, and there are lots. That's why I'm traveling across the country and speaking at board offices to get this message out there. Right.
It's one of the oldest and kind of most simplest adages out there, right? But the more you give, the more you receive, right? The more you put out there, the more comes back to you. And this has been a great chat. So really, I appreciate you being here, Jackie. Thank you so much for sharing more about yourself and about CWIRE. And it's been a real inspiring chat. I hope there's something to take away for both the women and the men listening.
Yeah, listen, I would also like to say to the men out there, this isn't us against you. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I have had many men tell me how great how much they're supporting this.
You were just talking about switching to collaborative and how that has made such a difference for you. That doesn't have to be along a gender line, right? Collaborative attitudes are, there's no gender to those.
That's exactly correct. Yeah. And I just, I want it to be equal.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, success in business can be elusive for everyone, right? And for women, we've discussed it today, there are nuances that really only serve to make business success harder to achieve, right? So
That's right.
The innovative collaboration offered by Jacquie and groups like CWIRE equips women with the tools and strategies to navigate the more complex paths women tread in the real estate business. Thanks for listening today. I'm Jesse Lalime, and I'll see you down the next critical path.